Hello, everybody. Let us start our discussion today. Today, we'll carry forward our understanding of matter waves. And from there, we'll learn something that came out in 1927 from Werner Heisenberg, the uncertainty principle, which showed us that we need to change our perspective of physics. The classical physics, the classical mechanics we have learned so far really doesn't work when in certain limits, particularly when you are talking about these electrons or subatomic particles. And we need to change from classical mechanics to a new mechanics, which we'll eventually call quantum mechanics, which we have started to study. Let us start from where we left yesterday. We were discussing about wave packets. Remember that de Broglie hypothesis, the Broglie hypothesis, it has told us that associated with every particle of energy E and momentum P, there is a wave which has frequency omega and a wave number k, or we can write this also as 2 pi by lambda. And then we talked about wave of a particle which has a complete definite velocity, or we talked about a particular example of wave. We said that the function that represents such a wave, and remember that we are dealing with one position dimension here. This function, the wave function, necessarily be complex. And one example that serves such a wave function is this. And then we said that this is, if I consider the real part of it, it is just a sine wave or a cosine wave. Real part is a cosine wave. This wave, I have a k and a e omega associated with it. So this k, we can relate the momentum of the wave, momentum of the particle with this k, and with this omega I can relate the energy of the particle. And you see, this wave essentially is a wave which has a very definite momentum. So what is the momenta? H cross k. And also a very definite energy. Let me talk about the momenta for the time being. But when we try to plot this wave, we could not say that this wave is representing a particle where the particle is. The particle seems to be everywhere because the wave is everywhere. It's a more sinusoidal waves. So he said, okay, so these type of things are good, but this does not looks like a particle because a particle is supposed to be at a position in space all the time. The position may vary with time, but every time I look at the particle, it is supposed to be at a given position. So we came to the idea of wave packets, where we even essentially combine such monochromatic. So this also we called a monochromatic wave because it has a single frequency. So we combined such many monochromatic waves, and we wrote down the wave function like the following. So it's many such monochromatic wave combined. So that's why there is an integration over k. Remember that we also introduced the concept of dispersion relation, which tells you how is omega dependent on k. So that's I have written here, omega as a function of k. And these different waves can has different amplitude, which is this phi k. In fact, we defined phi k in the following way. We first said that, okay, if I consider psi at t equals to 0, so that is this quantity, just putting t equals to 0 in the upper line, I can get this. Here, I don't need to write the omega t part because t is 0. And then phi k, we said, can be written in terms of psi in the following way. Minus ikx, the previous one was plus, and this is an integration over x. And remember that these are Fourier transform related. So this is a Fourier transform, and this is an inverse Fourier transform. This is what we discussed last time. And at the end, we also wrote down the phase velocity which is given by omega by k and the group velocity, which is d omega tk. Both of these depends on k. Different k can have different group and different phase velocity. So this equals Vg. Okay, so this is what we discussed last time. To start with today, let us take an example of such a wave packet. Okay, so wave packet in general was defined this way. We'll take an example of such a wave packet today. So what do we take? So how do I take an example of the wave packet? Well, if you look at this psi x0 line, so you see what all I have to do here for different wave packet is to choose this function phi k. So if I choose the function phi k in a certain way, then I will get one wave packet. If I choose the function different way, I will get a different wave packet. The wave packet, what is the wave packet that is representing the particle in question, essentially depends on what potential the particle is in. Okay, but that we will learn later. But the time being, let us just discuss a little bit about a very special type of wave packet. So this is called a Gaussian wave packet. Carl Friedrich Gauss was the person who introduced this function. That's why it's called a Gaussian wave packet. So how does phi k looks for this type of wave packet? So phi k looks like exponential of minus something called sigma, which is a parameter for the wave. It looks like this. Now, how will it, if I want to plot it, how will it look? So you see that at k equals to k0, k minus k0 becomes 0. So phi k will be 1. So at k equals to k0, at k equals to k0, phi k is 1. If k is not k0, so I have a square quantity here. So I will get something which is more than 0 and e to the power minus something which is more than 0, which is always less than 1. So at k not equals to k, it essentially means k not equals to k0, phi k has to be less than 1. and it really doesn't matter whether I increase phi from k from k0 or decrease k from k0, because in both cases I will k minus k0 whole square will be the same function. So this is also symmetric about k. Okay. So with this much of description, let me actually show you how this function looks like for a particular value of sigma. So let me show you how this function looks like. This is a plot of the function. Sigma I have taken to be 2 by 3. And as you can see, I have taken k0 equals to 0 here just for simplicity. There's nothing else. Forget about this dashed line and the double-headed arrow for the time being. What you see is that, first of all, it is absolutely symmetric about k equals to k0. If I would have chosen any other thing than k equals to k0, what all would have happened is I have to add some number to all the values in the x-axis here, or subtract some number which is k0 from all the values in x-axis here. That is the only change. You see the function symmetric. The function has a finite support, which means that after a certain value of k minus k0, the function almost goes to 0. You see that it is not quite 0 here, but if I go to even larger values of k or minus k in this plot, this function will eventually go to 0. Okay, and this arrow here denotes kind of width of the function, which you will come back to later. But just make a note that that width actually depends on 1 over the sigma, which is the parameter of the function defines. Okay, so let us not talk much about this function right now. We will come back to this plot again. Fine. So if this is my phi k, so then what will be my psi at x0? So let us write that down. So that can be estimated just doing that integration. And it turns out that it is something very interesting happens in this particular case, the psi at x0. And let me put a small suffix g over here. While plotting, I will not use that suffix, but this is just because I want to remind you that this is a particular wave packet called the Gaussian wave packet. And what is this? So this turns out to be the following. And you see something is very remarkable here. If you are observing closely, the two functions looks exactly the same. Gaussian phi, if the phi k is a Gaussian, psi g is also a Gaussian. Well, obviously it's a function of x, and sigma comes into the denominator instead of in the numerator, etc., and it gets an extra amplitude factor here. But apart from those, it looks exactly the same. Okay, so these are called the normalizations, which are in the case of phi it is 1, in this case it is not 1. But apart from those normalizations, the functions look exactly the same. And instead of k equals to k0, now you can see the maxima of the function will be at x equals to x0. So psi g max happens at x equals to x0. Okay, so let us now look at this function a little bit. So for the same value of sigma, which is 2 by 3, now my x-axis, my horizontal axis is x-axis. Again, I have chosen x0 equals to 0 just for simplicity, and I have plotted this function. One thing I have not done is I have not multiplied it by the normalization factor 1 by root 2 pi sigma, just to keep it simple. Okay, so if I compare this with the previous plot, which is of phi as a function of k, you see they look almost same. The width of the two functions are different, and the width now delta x is proportional to sigma. In the previous case, delta k, which is the width of the function phi k, was proportional to 1 by sigma. Just keep these two things in mind. All right, so I have got these two nice Gaussian functions, and it turns out that there are, at least I know of, only two functions which the Fourier transform of the function is the function itself. Like, for example, here I have a Gaussian. The Fourier transform of the Gaussian is a Gaussian again. Obviously, one you write in terms of k, other you write in terms of x, but that is all right. If I plot these side by side, now by hand, let's see how it will look like. Or what will it represent? Okay, so these are my two. This axis is say x, and this axis is say k. This is k equals to k0. This value is x equals to x0. Here I am plotting psi at x0. Here I am plotting phi k. Okay, if you wish, I will put the reminder sign g. So in this case, say it looks like this. So these are also sometimes called a bell-shaped curve because it looks like a inverted bell, or a bell actually, not an inverted bell, I should say. Okay, so away from x0 or away from k0, the value of this function is 0. Okay, now you see, last time we discussed about the concept of localization. So this we can say that these wave packets are also localized wave packets. Both of the wave packet psi g and its Fourier transform phi g, both are localized wave packet. Where are they localized? So here it is localized at x0, here it is localized at k0. So we can say, so where is the particle? If this wave function represent the particle, this wave function is the de Broglie function of the de Broglie, that representing the de Broglie wave, then I can ask the question now, where is the particle? The answer is definitely x0. So there is, it has the maximum value. And if I can ask also, what is the momentum? You will immediately say h cross k0. So that also tells us something interesting here, that phi k tells us about the momentum of the particle, like psi g tells us about the position where the particle is. So sometimes these are called, this itself is called a wave function. This is called a momentum wave function. And this is called the position wave function. They're not representing two different particles or two different systems. They're representing the exact same system, just that one likes the momentum, likes to talk about the momentum, the other likes to talk about the position of the particle. But there, see, if I know one, I can get the other because they're related by this nice Fourier transform relations. All right. What else do we see? we see that, okay, I can say that maybe the particle is at x0 because my wave function psi at x0 has a maximum value at x0. However, there is a spread. So the particle is at x0, but it can be a little bit off also. So I conclude from these wave functions, if these wave functions represent my particle, in fact, this particular wave function represent particle in a very famous potential, but I'll not tell you what it is. You can look at it up. But it also tells you the particle may not be exactly at x0. It's around it. And when I say it's around it, so I can define certain some way. I can define a width of this, so let's call this delta x. So delta x is, so the particle is at x0, but it can be in between delta x around x0. So it can be in between, if you wish, minus delta x by 2 to plus delta x by 2. Similarly, the momentum of the particle also we see, just because they are the same curve, it is easy to see here. That's why you are taking the advantage of the example of Gaussian wave packet. Momentum is also not exactly known. It's around k naught. And when I say around, again exactly the same way, I can define a width here, which is delta k. Okay. So if you wish, I can multiply both sides by h cross. And if you remember, I just mentioned that delta x goes as sigma and delta k goes as 1 by sigma. What do I mean by that? If sigma increases, delta x increases and delta k decreases. For a given sigma 2 by 3, we saw that one of them is wider, the other is shorter. Right? In fact, this is not the case only for the Gaussian wave packet. It turns out that for any wave packet, if you define the width in the position space and if you define the width in the momentum space for the momentum wave function, so this also sometimes called the momentum space, these are just names. Remember where this came about? This came about from the fact that we can describe the same wave function either in terms of phi or in terms of psi x0. So one I called position space, another called momentum space, position wave function or position space wave function if you wish, momentum space wave function, etc. And it turns out for any wave packet, not only Gaussian wave packet, the width of these two space wave functions are inversely related. Just like we saw here, delta x and delta k are inversely related. For any wave packet, this is true. Just Gaussian wave packet is what we are using to demonstrate it to you. Let me show you this. Let me show you this in more detail. So remember, we saw phi k like this, where delta k was 1 by sigma, we said. Remember, we saw this Remember, we saw this picture of phi k for the Gaussian wave packet, and we said that delta k is inversely proportional to sigma, and we saw delta x, which is proportional to sigma. So what happens if I change sigma and look at these two wave packets together? So that's what we will do. Here is a movie which is showing just that. You can see bottom I have plotted psi at x0, and top I have plotted psi k, and as one is expanding, the other is narrowing up. This essentially is the crack of the story today, which means that for any such position space and momentum space wave function, if one shrinks, the other will expand. Means if I know the position a little bit better, which means that I reduce delta x, then delta k will increase, which means my information about the exact momentum will be lost. This is precisely what came in Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So let me now write down the principle here. Unfortunately, we will not be able to get the mathematical steps that led to this principle because that's quite out of the scope of this syllabus. But we will be using and trying to understand what it really means. So Werner Heisenberg. This is 1927. Yes. Both the position and conjugate momentum, let me keep this in bracket. So like if I'm talking about the position x, then I should consider the conjugate momentum of x, which you get by del L del x dot, if you know the Lagrangian. So that is the momentum we are talking about. So if we are talking about x, we are not talking about the y momentum. So simultaneously, both position and conjugate momentum of a particle doesn't exist. With absolute precision, there is always uncertainty associated with the position measurement let us call that delta x, and let me backtrack because this is what I don't want to say. I don't want to say uncertainty associated with position measurement. I want to say there is uncertainty associated with the position delta x and momentum delta p and conjugate momentum delta p. So if you wish, you can have delta y and delta py also, but always the position that you have taken, you have to consider the conjugate momentum to that. And these two uncertainties, product of these two uncertainties is always greater than or equals h cross by 2. So that is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Let me write it here again. And as we will see, it has a huge implication. It deserves a nice frame. Now, if you look carefully, all this conjugate momentum business tells you that if I now for a little while venture into 3 dimensions, this will be true for other directions in the Cartesian system also. And there is no uncertainty. So this quantity, if I ask, this can be 0. So I can, if I want to measure the x position and the y momentum, I don't have any, if I want to know the x position and y momentum, I don't have any limit on that. I can know as precisely as I want. Now that is the important point, that I said two things here, that these does not exist with absolute precision. It is not, the uncertainty principle is not telling you that you will not be able to make an instrument which will be able to measure as precise enough. It is telling you that these things does not exist at all. Forget about measurements. And that's essentially coming from the concept of wave packet, which is that to represent a localized particle which has a certain momentum and certain position, knowable momentum and knowable position, we need the concepts of wave packet. And the wave packets in position and momentum space, their weights are inversely related, which means that if I want to know the position with higher accuracy, keep that delta x small enough such that my accuracy in position increases, then my momentum space accuracy decreases. And that is the inherent way the particle is, which is, according to the Broglie, is in terms of this matter waves. Okay, so this is what is uncertainty principle telling you. And let us venture it on it a little bit and see, okay, so this is something very strange. We cannot measure delta x and delta p together. What effect will it have? So for this, let me take you back to classical mechanics a little bit. So Hamiltonian mechanics, I'll take you back to. So this is from classical mechanics. So what was the idea of Hamiltonian mechanics? To represent Hamiltonian in terms of P and X. And say this is equals to E. So Hamiltonian independent of T, independent of time. So there is a definite constant energy for the system. Most of the system will really tell like that, at least ideally. And then we said that we have this equation. We said how x changes, which is del h del p, and how p changes, which is del h del x px. Keeping the suffix x because for this discussion, because we have already written down y and z, so that's why I'm just keeping the suffix x. Otherwise, if I don't keep the suffix, you should understand that I'm talking about the x component of the momentum. Anyway, so this is how so these are two differential equation, two first order differential equation in time. What we need to know to solve this to solve the dynamics of the particle, we need to know how the Hamiltonian depends on x and p. So I should have written x and p here. So let me correct it because this is not good. So how the Hamiltonian depends on x and p. So for harmonic oscillator it will be something, for something else it will be something else. The other thing that I need to know is at say t equals to 0, what is the value of x 0 and px 0. These two things if I know, then I will be able to solve my system. I will be able to know where the particle is, what is its momentum at all time. Unfortunately, you realize uncertainty principle tells us that x naught and px naught cannot be measured, cannot be known, or does not exist, rather even better, does not exist to arbitrary accuracy. And that means then my entire idea about whatever you have learned in the half of your semester about classical mechanics will not work anymore when you come to the subatomic domain. Now, is that true? So all that you have learned for the half semester course, is that completely useless? Well, that's not quite true, because let's see an example of our good old cricket ball. And this is a very super fast cricket ball, because we say that the velocity of this cricket ball is say 200 kilometer per second, not hour, just because that will make our calculation easier to do. You can try with per hour also. And its mass is 0.5 kg, so its momentum, you will agree, is 0.5 times 200 times, let's convert to kilometer to meter. So this is this much kg meter per second, which is 10 to the 5 kg meter per second. And this is the momentum. And say the position of this is x is say 1 meter, just we are. So this, let's call this p0, because that is the mean, or that is the value of the momentum for the cricket ball. and this is the position. Now, this is what we want to know. These are the initial conditions. So, say this is the initial conditions that we want to know for the cricket ball. Okay. Now, when you are doing this calculation, obviously there always is another type of uncertainty. Remember that the uncertainty we talked about has nothing to do with the measurements. This is all about the fact that the precise position and momentum at the same time does not exist. Forget about measurements. Now we are talking about measurement. So if I want to measure this x naught and p naught, so we will measure at an accuracy of say delta x by x naught. We will measure at 1% accuracy, which means that this will be 0.01. This is how you quote your error results in the experiments also. You'll learn when you come here. And this is also say 0.01, which means now your delta x is 10 to the minus 2 in this particular example, and delta p is 10 to the minus 3. 10 to the plus 3. Okay, so meter, kg meter per second. So these are the measurements. So these are measurements errors. So let me write this as different delta. So capital delta. Let me write it properly because you should not confuse the uncertainty with the measurement errors. So this is delta x. This is delta p. Delta. Measurement errors. And you see the measurement errors are quite large, such that delta x, delta p, for in terms of the measurement errors, is 10 to the 1 kg meter square per second, which is much larger than h cross by 2, which is h cross is 1.05 into 10 to the minus 34 by 2 in the same unit. So if you are doing so much of measurement error, obviously you will never reach that limit. So this delta x, delta p, the what you can know for a cricket ball is always much higher or lower accuracy than what is given in terms of the uncertainty principle. So let's look at a different example now, which is the electron in Bohr orbit. So you see one thing is coming here clearly, that the uncertainty principle will only matter. Always your measurement errors will be of this order, so 1% or even less or sometimes more. So the uncertainty principle will only be effective when x times p, x naught times p naught, the position you want to measure times the momentum you want to measure, is near to h cross, near to the value of h cross. So what about for the Bohr orbit? So Bohr orbit, a naught, I am not writing precisely, this is about 10 to the minus 10 meter, about 1 angstrom, 6 angstrom, 0.6 angstrom I guess, but it's about 1 angstrom. And the velocity is about 10 to the 6 meter per second, quite fast. Mass of the electron you know quite well. It's about 10 to the minus 30 kg, right? And if I do the same trick and calculate delta x, delta p here, this will come out to be now 10 to the minus 30, around of the order of 10 to the minus 36. I am not being very precise with these numbers, as you can see, but this being of the order of h cross minus 34, I'm sorry, or okay, it doesn't matter, let me correct, okay, of the order of minus 34, which is of the order of h cross. This being of the order of h cross, telling you that in these cases, the good old method of giving an initial position, an initial momentum, and using Hamilton's equations to solve for the orbit of a Bohr electron will not work, because you will have a lot of uncertainty in the initial conditions itself. Okay. So when x naught times p naught is of the order of h cross, uncertainty principle becomes useful. Or important, and classical physics fails. We will see that even we will not talk about the trajectory of particles in such cases anymore. But let us discuss a little bit about classical physics, one particular example of harmonic oscillator, and we will see how this is in action, how this changes a lot of things. So harmonic oscillator, Hamiltonian mechanics, the Hamiltonian is essentially the energy, and you remember that this is given by, so let me go back to one-dimensional cases. So p square by 2m plus half kx square. So p is px, but I'm not writing explicitly. Okay, so if I consider, so let's say m equals to 1 and k equals to 1, just for simplicity. So I get E is equals, or 2E equals p square plus x square. Now just in Hamiltonian mechanics, the two variables are x and p, so one can plot trajectories of particles with one axis x and the other axis p. So these type of plots are called phase space plots. If you have more x and more p, you have to use all of them. We have just only one x and one p. And can you guess what this trajectory will look like for a harmonic oscillator? It is straightforward, right? So it's like p square plus x square. So it's like x square plus y square equals to r square. It's a circle with a radius of root over 2e. So it will be circles like this. So this will be circle just because I have taken both k and m to be 1. If there are any other value, then it will be more like an ellipse. But let us stick to the circle for the time being. So what happens if I change e? If I reduce e, I will get another circle which is of a different radius. Okay, keep this in mind. Here I have drawn the phase space trajectory of three harmonic oscillators, or three particles in harmonic oscillator. Their energies are different and all the units are arbitrary. That really doesn't matter for this discussion. But one energy is one in whatever unit it is. One energy is 0.5, and then one has very small energy 0.01, which makes this very, very tiny circle over here. Okay. Now let us look at what uncertainty principle is telling us. So if I have, uncertainty principle is telling us that if I have delta x and delta px, and before I forget, let me, okay. So let us look at what is uncertainty principle telling us. It is telling us that delta x times delta px is greater than equals h cross by 2 and which means if I cannot have, say I have measured the delta px already, so I cannot have a measurement of delta x which is lesser than h cross by 2 delta px. Or if I have measured delta x, I cannot have delta px less than h cross by 2 delta x. So which means that x, if I consider this equation, if I go to a point which has the value of, say, I want to have x naught to have a value which is equals to some h cross by 20, and I want a value of px, or let me directly say that I want to have a value of x naught p naught as h cross by 20. This is not possible. So if I take this as an equation, I can plot a curve of x and px, and let's see what that curve means. Here, this dotted line represents a curve which is a rectangular hyperbola, and there are 4 of these corresponds to different values of positive x or positive p or negative x or negative p. And you see that if I consider any point inside this this plus shaped object, any points here, you can imagine every point will have x times p less than h cross by 2, because these curves are drawn as x times p equals h cross by 2, which means to get that small circle which has an energy 0.01, it would have required to have an initial condition x naught and p naught, and the product of which is less than the uncertainty product. So let us discuss it a little further, and let me draw only one quadrant, the first quadrant only, just for simplicity, and discuss what is happening. So I had these different energy circles. So this circle is of certain energy, and then I had a circle which is very tiny, which is of this energy. And what we also did was that we drew a line which is x times px is h cross. So this line is xpx equals h cross by 2. So which means any point if I take here, x times px is less than h cross by 2. So that is what comes from directly from your theory of graphs and all. So if I take a point here, see what do I mean by these trajectories? I mean that if at x equals to 0, if the value of the momentum was px, then this is the trajectory, or this entire circle is the trajectory that harmonic oscillator will follow in the phase space. So if the harmonic oscillator follows this circle in the phase space, that means it would have had an initial condition which is any point on this circle. So t equals to 0, it should lie at any point in this circle. But you see that is not possible because your uncertainty product is stopping you to do that. Which essentially means now, for a harmonic oscillator if you wish, the largest circle that I can fit in here will have this radius. This will have a corresponding energy. Any energy minimum lesser than that will have a circle for which the uncertainty product will be violated. So the harmonic oscillator will have a minimum energy for it. And in the next class, we'll start by calculating that minimum energy. And you realize that uncertainty principle tells you now that any such quantum system for which uncertainty principle is important, or actually any quantum system, will have a minimum energy. So any quantum system always have a minimum energy. Let me specify non-zero energy. Okay, we'll stop there today and we'll come back with our discussion in the next class, first on uncertainty principle, and then we'll carry forward from there. Thank you.